The twin suns of Asterium cast harsh light across the barren plains, turning the crystalline sand into a sea of glittering diamonds. Nira crouched at the edge of the shattered mesa, her indigo skin streaked with dried blood and dust. The ceremonial dagger of her ancestors, a curved blade of luminous azure crystal, trembled in her exhausted grip. Its once brilliant glow had dimmed to a faint pulse, mirroring her fading strength. Behind her, the mesa dropped away into a bottomless ravine. Before her stood 12 warriors of the Vexery clan, their obsidian armor adorned with the bones of her slaughtered people. 3 more of their number already lay dead at her feet, testament to her desperate fight. "The last of the Celastra," said a voice that once brought her comfort. Davros stepped forward, his weathered face now marked with ritual scars that declared his allegiance to the Vexery. The man who had taught her to hunt, to fight, to survive, now stood ready to end her life. "Surrender the keystone, Nira, and I will grant you a quick death." Nira spat blood onto the sand. "You were my teacher, my friend." Her voice cracked with exhaustion and betrayal. "Why?" "The Celastra have held power for too long," Davros replied, twisting the serrated blade in his hand. The neurotoxin coating its edge glistened in the sunlight. "Your father refused to see reason to share the ancient knowledge. His stubbornness cost your people everything." Memories flashed through Nira's mind, her village in flames. The screams of children, her mother's final words as she pressed the keystone into Nira's palm and whispered for her to run. 3 days of relentless pursuit had led to this final stand. The small stone in her pocket seemed to burn against her thigh. The keystone, a simple artifact that her family had guarded for generations without fully understanding its importance. Now it would die with her. "The stars will remember what happened here," Nira said, straightening her spine despite the pain lancing through her wounded shoulder. "Long after your bones have turned to dust, the cosmic winds will carry our song." Davros laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Poetic but pointless. Your bloodline ends today, and the secrets of the Celastra will finally belong to those who deserve them." He raised his blade, his warriors closing in around her like shadows at dusk. Nira gripped her dagger tighter, preparing for her final moments. She would not die kneeling. The air suddenly crackled with energy. The warriors paused, looking up. As the sky above them shifted from burnt orange to an impossible deep blue, a deafening roar split the silence as something plummeted from the heavens. Trailing fire and smoke, the object the person crashed into the center of the warrior circle, sending bodies and sand flying in all directions. Where there had been solid ground now stood a crater, and in its center, a figure rose slowly to their feet. A human male brushed dust from what appeared to be mechanical wings folding into a pack on his back. His skin was tan from exposure to distant suns, his hair the color of night, with eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. A network of scars traced patterns across his jawline and neck, telling stories of survival against impossible odds. "Well," he said, surveying the stunned warriors with casual interest, "that was a rougher landing than expected." His voice carried an accent Nira had never heard before, melodic yet rough-edged. He looked at the empty scabbards at his sides and frowned. "Also, I seem to have misplaced my sword somewhere in the atmosphere. Inconvenient timing." Davros recovered first, his shock transforming into rage. "Kill them both." 3 warriors charged at once. The human moved with fluid grace, sidestepping. The first attacker, in using the warrior's momentum to send him tumbling over the cliff edge, he ducked beneath the second warrior's blade, coming up with a fistful of sand that he threw into the attacker's eyes before delivering a precise strike to the throat. Nira didn't hesitate. Using the distraction, she lunged at the third warrior, driving her crystal dagger deep between the plates of his armor. As he fell, she claimed his weapon, a short-bladed axe with wicked edges. "I'm Talon," the human called out, now back to back with her, as the remaining warriors circled them cautiously. "You must be Nira. Your signature was on the beacon that drew me here." "Beacon?" Nira asked, confusion mingling with the adrenaline surging through her veins. "I activated no beacon." Talon blocked a strike with his forearm guard, the metal singing as it deflected the blade. "That stone in your pocket says otherwise. Been broadcasting across half the galaxy for the past 3 days." He glanced at her over his shoulder, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Lucky for you, I was in the neighborhood. Another warrior fell to Nira's borrowed axe. Why would you answer such a call? What do you want with the keystone? Let's discuss that after we're not about to die, Talon suggested, ducking another attack. There's a cave system to clicks east of here. Think you can run? Davros roared in frustration as more of his warriors fell. Reinforcements are coming. You cannot escape. Nira met Talon's gaze, seeing something there that sparked a dangerous feeling in her chest. Hope. She hadn't felt hope since watching her village burn. I can run, she answered, adjusting her grip on the axe. Talon nodded, his mechanical pack humming to life. Then stay close. He grabbed her free hand, his skin warm against hers. And whatever happens, don't let go. As Davros and his remaining warriors charged, Talon pulled Nira toward the edge of the mesa. Without hesitation, he leaped into the abyss, taking her with him. Instead of falling to their deaths, they soared, the mechanical wings extending once more to catch the updraft from the ravine. Nira's heart hammered against her ribs, fear and exhilaration warring within her as they glided away from the mesa, toward the distant ridge of stone that promised temporary sanctuary. Behind them, Davros's enraged shouts faded into the wind. For the moment, at least, they had survived a human from beyond the stars and the last guardian of the Celastra. It's bound together by a mystery neither fully understood. The cave entrance was barely visible, a jagged wound in the rock face obscured by overhanging crystalline formations. Talon's wings folded with a mechanical hiss as they touched down on the narrow ledge. Nira stumbled forward, her legs trembling. From exhaustion and the lingering shock of their flight, we should be safe here for now, Talon said, scanning the horizon. The ridge's mineral composition will mask our heat signatures. Nira pressed her back against the cool stone, watching. This stranger with wary eyes. His clothing was unlike anything she'd seen, a flight suit of some advanced material beneath a worn leather jacket that had clearly weathered countless battles. Who are you? Really? Talon's silver eyes met hers. I told you. My name is Talon. I'm from Earth originally, though that was a lifetime ago. He reached into his pack, producing a small device that projected a holographic map of the surrounding terrain. I'm a reclaimer. I find lost artifacts, ancient technologies, things that should be preserved rather than destroyed or misused. Scavenger, Nira translated, her voice edged with suspicion. His mouth quirked in a half-smile. I prefer archaeologists with flexible methods, and right now I'm looking for something called the Prism of Solaris. He nodded toward her pocket. That keystone you're carrying? It's part of the locator system. Nira's hand instinctively covered her pocket. This has been in my family for 17 generations. We are its guardians. And you've done an admirable job, Talon replied, his tone softening. But do you know what you've been guarding? Before she could answer, distant voices echoed across the ravine. The Vexery were organizing search parties. Talon gestured toward the cave. We should continue this conversation somewhere less exposed. Passage narrowed as they ventured deeper, forcing them to navigate by the faint glow of Nira's dagger and the small light on Talon's wrist device. The walls were lined with ancient glyphs that seemed to shimmer with residual energy. Your people, Tolan said, studying the markings. They weren't native to Asterium, were they? Nira's steps faltered. We've been here for over 400 cycles. Our histories speak of the Great Migration, when our ancestors came from the dying world of Celastra Prime. And the Vexery? Were they here when your people arrived? Something in his tone made Nira uncomfortable. They came later. Raiders and scavengers who grew bolder with each generation. She paused, memories of Davros's betrayal fresh in her mind. Why does it matter? Talon ran his fingers along a particularly complex glyph. Because history is rarely as simple as the victors record it. He turned to face her, his expression serious. The Prism of Solaris isn't a weapon, Nira. It's a terraforming matrix technology capable of transforming entire planets, restoring dead worlds to life. The passage opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. Crystalline formations, grew from the floor and walls, casting prismatic light across the ancient space. In the center stood a stone altar, carved with symbols matching those on Nira's dagger. "My father would bring me here," she whispered, approaching the altar with reverence. "He called it the heart chamber, said it was where our ancestors first communed with the planet's spirit." Toland studied the altar, then looked back at Nira. "May I see the keystone?" She hesitated, then slowly removed it from her pocket, a small pyramidal crystal that pulsed with gentle blue light. As she held it out, their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected jolt of warmth up her arm. For a moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Toland cleared his throat, focusing on the keystone. "According to my research, the prism chamber lies beneath this one. This should activate the passage." He placed the keystone in a triangular depression. On the altar, the chamber filled with humming energy as lines of light spread from the altar, illuminating hidden glyphs across the walls. The floor trembled, and a section beside the altar slid away, revealing a spiraling staircase descending into darkness. "The way down," Toland said, a hint of excitement in his voice. Nira hesitated. "Why should I trust you? You appear from nowhere, claiming knowledge of my people's most sacred relics. For all I know, you seek the prism for your own gain." "Fair point." Toland leaned against the altar, regarding her thoughtfully. "My homeworld is dying, not unlike Salastra Prime in your histories. Devastating wars, environmental collapse. We're running out of options. The prism technology could save billions of lives. And if I decide not to help you, then I'll respect your decision and find another way." His expression was earnest, without the manipulation she'd come to expect from Davros. "But I'm hoping you'll at least hear me out. After all, I did save your life back there." "After I saved yours," she countered. There was less edge to her voice now. A distant rumble echoed through the cavern, the sound of explosives. The Vexery had found the cave system. "We're getting closer," Talon said, retrieving the keystone. "We need to move." Nira glanced toward the entrance, then back at the mysterious staircase. "If what you say about the prism is true, why did my ancestors hide it?" "Maybe they were protecting it," Toland suggested. "Or maybe they were hiding from something else." "Entirely?" He offered his hand. "Only one way to find out." After a moment's hesitation, Nira accepted his hand. His fingers wrapped around hers with surprising gentleness for a man who fought so fiercely. Together, they descended into the unknown. Leaving the sounds of pursuit behind, the staircase seemed endless, spiraling deeper than Nira had imagined possible. The walls were smooth, unlike the rough-hewn passages above, suggesting more advanced construction methods. "Tell me about your people," Toland said as they descended. Before the massacre, Nira's throat tightened. "You were peaceful. Scholars, artists, healers. My father was our elder, keeper of the old knowledge." Her voice grew softer. "Davros was his most trusted advisor, like family to us. I still don't understand why he turned against us. Sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us," Talon replied, his voice carrying a weight of personal experience. "My own brother sold out our colony to raiders for a chance at power. 40,000 people died, including our parents." Nira looked at him with new understanding. "Is that why you became a reclaimer?" "Partly. I couldn't save my people, but maybe I can help save others." He paused as the staircase ended, opening into a corridor lined with dormant technology. "This is pre-migration architecture, much older than your settlement." The corridor led to a sealed door covered in intricate locking mechanisms. Toland examined it with growing excitement. "This is at the outer chamber of the Prism Sanctuary." As Nira approached, the mechanisms began to move, responding to her presence. The massive door slid open with a hiss of escaping air, revealing a chamber untouched for centuries. "It recognizes you," Toland whispered, his silver eyes wide with wonder. "Your genetic signature." They stepped inside, and the chamber illuminated itself, holographic displays activating along the walls. Nira gasped as she found herself surrounded by images of her world, not as the desert it had become, but as a lush paradise of forests and oceans. "This is what Asterium once was," Toland said, studying the displays. Before the cataclysm that nearly destroyed it, Nira's fingers traced a holographic tree, her heart aching for a beauty she'd never known. My people always spoke of returning. The world too green? I thought it was just a legend. Not a legend, Tolan said, moving toward the center of the room where a pedestal stood empty. A memory, and with the prism, possibly a future. The moment hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. Nira found herself studying Talon's profile, the determined set of his jaw, the compassion in his eyes that belied his warrior's demeanor. For the first time since the massacre, she felt something besides grief and rage. There should be another door, Tolan said, turning to scan the chamber, leading to the prism itself. Before Nira could respond, a new sound echoed through the chamber footsteps. Approaching rapidly from a hidden entrance they hadn't noticed. "We're not alone," she whispered, raising her dagger. Tolan drew a small energy weapon from his belt. "Stay behind me." The footsteps grew louder, and then a figure emerged from the shadows, a Vexery warrior, his obsidian armor gleaming in the holographic light. But unlike the others, he removed his helmet, revealing a face Nira had never expected to see again. "Jovan," she gasped, her dagger nearly slipping from her fingers. "Brother." "Hello, sister." Sister Jovan's voice was deeper than Nira remembered, his once boyish features hardened by months of hardship. The ceremonial markings of their clan remained on his face, but new scars crisscrossed them, deliberate modifications that spoke of a changed allegiance. Nira took a step forward, emotions warring within her, joy at finding her brother alive, confusion at his Vexery armor, suspicion at his unexpected appearance. "We thought you were dead. After the raid, when I couldn't find you among the survivors, I nearly was." Jovan's gaze flicked to Tolan, then back to his sister. "The Vexery found me half buried in the ruins, barely breathing. They could have finished me off. Instead, they took me in, healed me." Tolan kept his weapon ready, his stance protective beside Nira. "And in exchange, they showed me the truth." Jovan gestured at the holographic displays surrounding them. "About Asterium, about our so-called noble heritage." "The truth," Nira demanded, her voice rising. "What could possibly justify the slaughter of our people?" Jovan moved to a control panel, his fingers dancing across ancient interfaces with surprising familiarity. The holograms shifted, displaying new scenes, violent conflicts. Massive ships descending from the skies, armored figures driving indigenous people from their homes. 400 years ago, Jovan said, our ancestors didn't find an uninhabited world ripe for settlement. They found Asterium already populated by a thriving civilization, the original Vexery. Not raiders, but caretakers of this world and its technology. Nira shook her head, denial rising in her throat. "No. Our histories speak of a barren world. It's transformed by our ancestors' terraforming knowledge lies." Jovan cut in, his voice sharp with conviction. The Celastra came as refugees, were welcomed by the Vexery, then betrayed that welcome. They possessed advanced weapons technology the peaceful Vexery couldn't match. Our noble ancestors slaughtered their hosts, drove the survivors into the wastelands, and claimed Asterium for themselves. Tolan studied the historical projections with a grim expression. "This matches fragments I've found in other archives. The Great Migration wasn't entirely peaceful. You knew?" Nira turned to him, betrayal fresh in her eyes. "I suspected." Talon's silver eyes met hers with unexpected gentleness. "History is rarely black and white, Nira, especially when survival is at stake," Jovan continued, his voice softening slightly. "The original settlers are direct ancestors. They made a terrible choice. But they did it to save our species." He gestured to another hologram showing a planet breaking apart. Celastra Prime was dying faster than predicted. They had thousands of refugees with nowhere to go. "So they took what wasn't theirs," Nira whispered, the weight of ancestral guilt settling on her shoulders. "And in their shame they rewrote history," Jovan agreed. "Each generation adding more layers to the lie until the truth was buried completely." Tolan lowered his weapon, studying Jovan with calculating eyes. "If you know all this, you must also know about the Prism of Solaris." Jovan nodded. The most powerful terraforming device ever created. The Vexery used it to transform Asterium. From a barren rock to paradise, our ancestors stole it, then hid it when they realized they couldn't control its power. His expression hardened. Davros has been searching for it for decades since he found the original records in the Forbidden Archives. Davros Nira spat the name like poison. Our father trusted him. Our father denied him access to the truth, Jovan countered. When Davros discovered what had been hidden, he sought out the surviving Vexery tribes. He offered them justice. Return of their sacred technology, at the cost of genocide. Nira's voice cracked with emotion. Children died in that raid, Jovan. Elders who had nothing to do with ancient crimes. Guilt flickered across Jovan's features before he mastered it. War has casualties. The Vexery suffered far worse at our ancestors' hands. And now what? Talon asked, his tone neutral, but his body still positioned protectively near Nira. You help the Vexery reclaim the prism and everyone lives happily ever after? Jovan's expression darkened. The prism can restore Asterium to its former glory. Under proper guidance, it can undo centuries of damage. Proper guidance meaning Davros? Nira asked bitterly. He understands its potential better than anyone, Jovan replied. But something in his voice suggested uncertainty. Talon took a careful step forward. The prism technology isn't just about restoration, Jovan. In the wrong hands, it could be weaponized as to destroy rather than create. That's not Davros's intention, Jovan insisted, though his conviction seemed to waver. Are you certain? You're pressed, sensing her brother's doubt. The man who ordered our people executed, who tried to kill me on the Mesa Du, you truly believe his motives are pure? Before Jovan could answer, the chamber trembled as a distant explosion echoed through the ancient complex. Dust rained from the ceiling as warning lights flashed across the control panels. They've breached the upper levels, Jovan said, alarm crossing his features. Davros must have followed my tracking signal. He led them here? Nira's voice rose in accusation, not intentionally. Jovan looked genuinely distressed. I disabled my tracker before entering, but they must have another explosion. Closer this time. Cut him off. The chamber's security systems engaged ancient barriers sliding into place across the main entrance. It won't hold them for long, Tolan warned, checking his weapon. We need to reach the prism chamber before they do. Jovan hesitated. Conflict evident in his expression. Inner sanctum requires specific genetic access. Only direct descendants of both bloodlines can open it together. Both bloodlines? Nira asked. Celastra and Vexery, Jovan explained. A safeguard built into the original design, the prism can only be accessed when representatives of both peoples stand united. He looked at his sister meaningfully. You and I, Nira, we can open it. How is that possible? She demanded. We're both Celastra. Jovan's expression grew somber. Not entirely, our mother. She wasn't pure Celastra. She was half Vexery, descended from one of the few peaceful unions during the early conflicts. Father married her despite the stigma, kept her heritage secret to protect her. The revelation struck Nira like a physical blow. That's why her markings were different. Why the elders always treated her with such suspicion, and why we can access the inner sanctum, Jovan confirmed. Together, Tolan studied them both, his expression thoughtful. If what you're saying is true, then the prism was never meant to belong to either side alone. It was designed for cooperation, for unity between the peoples of this world. Another explosion rocked the chamber, this one close enough to crack one of the barrier walls. Time was running out. We need to decide, Tolan urged. Davros and his warriors will be here any moment. Nira looked between her brother and the human who had risked everything to help hurt two men representing different paths. Different truths. The weight of history and future possibility hung in the balance. Show me the way, she said to Jovan, her decision made. Let's see this prism for ourselves before anyone else claims it. Jovan nodded, relief visible in his features. He led them to a seemingly blank wall at the rear of the chamber, placing his palm against its surface. The wall responded to his touch, revealing hidden glyphs that matched the ones on Nira's dagger. Together, he said, holding out his hand to his sister. Nira hesitated, then placed her palm against the wall beside his. For a moment, nothing happened. Then warmth spread from the wall through her arm, and the glyphs began to glow with increasing intensity. The wall dissolved, revealing a crystalline passage that descended deeper into the planet's heart. "The prism awaits," Jovan whispered, replacing the hardness in his eyes. As they entered the passage, Nira felt Talon's presence close behind. His warmth, a reassuring constant in a world where every truth she'd known had been appended. His hand brushed against hers briefly, unspoken promise of support that made her heart beat faster despite the danger surrounding them. The final chamber of the prism awaited, and with it, a decision that would change the fate of Asterium forever. The inner sanctum was unlike anything Nira had ever seen, a perfect sphere carved from what appeared to be a single massive crystal. The walls pulsed with internal light that shifted through colors beyond naming, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. At the center, suspended in a field of energy, hovered a multifaceted crystal the size of both her fists, together the prism of Solaris. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the crystalline chamber. Jovan moved toward the center with reverence, the most powerful terraforming device ever created. With this, the vexery transformed a barren rock into a paradise. With it, we can do so again. Talon circled the chamber slowly, studying the ancient mechanisms that maintained the energy field. "This technology is beyond anything in my records. The crystalline matrix appears to be quantum entangled with the planet's core." "The keystone," Jovan said, holding out his hand to Nira. "We need it to initiate the awakening sequence." She hesitated, looking from her brother to Talon. "If what you've told me is true, this belongs to the vexery by right. It belongs to Asterium," Tolan corrected gently. "To all its people. That's why it requires both bloodlines to access it. Was never meant to be controlled by one faction." Alone, the chamber trembled as another explosion echoed from above. The vexery forces were getting closer. "We don't have time for philosophy," Jovan urged. "Davros will be here soon. Give me the keystone, sister." Something in his tone made Nira pause. "Why are you so eager, brother? Moments ago, you seemed uncertain about Davros's intentions." Jovan's expression hardened. "I'm trying to save what's left of both our peoples. The prism can restore Asterium, give us all a future." "And what does Davros intend to do with it?" "Exactly," Tolan asked, his posture casual, but his eyes sharp. "Terraforming is just one of the prism's capabilities, isn't it?" A flicker of unease crossed Jovan's features. "What do you mean?" "I've studied similar technologies across 17 systems," Talon explained, moving closer to Nira. "What can create can also destroy. A device capable of transforming a planet could just as easily tear it apart, or be weaponized against other worlds." Understanding dawned in Nira's eyes. "That's what Davros wants, not restoration revenge." Jovan's silence confirmed her suspicion. "He plans to use it against the Solastra colonies on neighboring worlds," Tolan continued. "A genocide. To answer a genocide committed centuries ago, they deserve justice," Jovan said, but his conviction was wavering. "Our ancestors slaughtered theirs, stole their world, and now Davros would repeat that crime?" Nira challenged. "How does that break the cycle? How does more death heal old wounds?" Before Jovan could answer, the chamber entrance exploded inward. Through the dust and debris stepped Davros, flanked by 6 elite vexery warriors. His scarred face twisted into a triumphant smile. "Family reunion?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "How touching. Hand over the keystone, children. Your little history lesson has delayed us long enough." Talon moved in front of Nira, his weapon raised. "You'll have to go through me first." Davros laughed. The offworlder, so noble, so ignorant of what's truly at stake. He gestured to his warriors. "Kill him. Bring me the siblings alive we need. Their blood for the final activation." The warriors surged forward. Tolan met them with fluid grace, his fighting style a perfect blend of precision and adaptability. He dropped 2 warriors in rapid succession. But the remaining 4 circled him with practiced coordination. Nerea raised her dagger, preparing to join the fight, when Joven caught her arm. "Wait," he whispered, his eyes fixed on Davros. Something's wrong. Davros had moved to the chamber's control panel, inputting a sequence that made the energy field around the prism fluctuate dangerously. The crystal's light turned blood red, and the chamber began to tremble. "What are you doing?" Joven demanded, loud enough for Davros to hear. "That's not the restoration protocol." Davros didn't look up from his work. "Did you really believe I cared about restoring this miserable dust ball? The prism is a weapon. Boy, the most powerful in the galaxy. With it, I'll cleanse not just the Celestra colonies, but any world that stands in our way." Horror dawned on Joven's face. "You lied to me, to all of us." "I showed you enough truth to make you useful," Davros replied coldly. "Your mixed blood was the key I needed to access this chamber. Now, I only need your final contribution." He drew a ceremonial dagger from his belt. "The prism requires a sacrifice to unlock its full potential, blood freely given or forcibly taken." Talon, still fighting the remaining warriors, called out, "Nira, the keystone. Use it on the central pedestal." Understanding flashed between them. Nira pulled the keystone from her pocket, its blue light pulsing in harmony with the chamber's crystalline walls. "Joven," she said urgently, "whatever happened, before whatever truths or lies we've been told, this is our chance to make it right. Help me." Her brother looked between her and Davros, conflict evident in his features. Then, with sudden resolve, he nodded. Together, as Davros lunged toward them, they moved as one to the central pedestal. Nira placed the keystone in its housing, and both siblings pressed their hands against the activation plates on either side. Nothing happened. "It's not working," Joven said, panic rising in his voice. Davros laughed, advancing with his dagger raised. "The prism doesn't respond to half-breeds alone. It needs pure bloodlines, the conqueror and the conquered, united in purpose." Alan fought his way to them, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Nira, take my hand." Without questioning, she reached for him with her free hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, the chamber filled with blinding light. The keystone pulsed with renewed energy, and the prism itself began to rotate faster, its facets catching and reflecting the light in patterns that wrote themselves across the walls. "Impossible," Davros whispered, shielding his eyes. "Not impossible," Talon said, his voice strong despite his injuries. "Inevitable. Prism responds to intention as much as bloodline. It was created to heal, not destroy." The energy field around the prism expanded, enveloping Nira and Tolan in a cocoon of light. Within that shared radiance, something profound passed between them: memories, emotions, understanding beyond words. She saw his world, his struggles, the path that had led him across the stars to find her. He witnessed her pain, her strength, the unwavering spirit that had kept her fighting when all seemed lost. In that moment of perfect connection, Nira understood why the prism had responded to their combined touch. Talon wasn't just a random human who had stumbled upon her world. He carried within him the blood of Earth's first terraformers, scientists who had shared knowledge with the original Vexery millennia ago. "The cycle completes," she whispered, squeezing his hand tighter. "What's separated comes together again." The light intensified, then contracted suddenly into the prism itself. When it faded, the crystal had transformed, no longer red with destructive potential, but a clear, perfect prism containing all colors and none. Davros, seeing his weapon neutralized, snarled with rage and lunged at them with his dagger. But Joven intercepted him, catching the blade in his own shoulder rather than let it reach his sister. Joven gasped, his blood spilling onto the crystalline floor. Enough revenge. Talon moved with lightning speed, disarming Davros and forcing him to his knees. The remaining Vexery warriors, witnessing the prism's transformation, lowered their weapons in confusion and awe. "The prism has chosen," Talon announced, his voice carrying strange authority in the ancient chamber. "Not destruction, but restoration. Not division, but unity." Nira knelt beside her wounded brother, tears streaming down her face. "Why?" she asked simply. Jovan managed a weak smile. "'Cause you were right. More death won't heal old wounds." He looked up at the hovering prism now, pulsing with gentle, harmonious light. "Perhaps this can." As if in response to his words, the prism released waves of energy that spread through the chamber, healing Jovan's wound before their eyes. The energy continued outward, a ripple that they could feel extending beyond the sanctuary, beyond the cave system, out into the barren landscape of Asterium itself. "It's beginning," Tolan said with wonder. "The restoration." Nira stood, still holding his hand, feeling the connection between them growing stronger rather than fading. "What happens?" Now, Talon looked at her, his silver eyes reflecting the prism's light. "That," he said softly, "is entirely up to us." 1 month later, Nira stood at the edge of what had once been the shattered mesa, watching in awe as green tendrils of new growth pushed through the formerly barren soil. The transformation of Asterium had begun slowly, at first moisture returning to the air. Microorganisms awakening in the dead soil but was now accelerating with each passing day. Where there had been only sand and rock, delicate saplings now reached toward the twin suns. The crystalline desert was giving way to meadows of iridescent grass and flowers that hadn't bloomed on Asterium for centuries. "It's happening faster than I expected," Tolan said, joining her at the cliff edge. The past weeks of working together had softened the edges of their initial wariness, replaced by something deeper and more complex. "The planet remembers what it once was," Nira replied, kneeling to touch a small blue flower that hadn't existed a week ago. "It's not creation, it's restoration." The prism of Solaris remained in its sanctuary, but its influence spread outward in ever-widening circles. The process couldn't be rushed, but within a few years, the ancient records suggested Asterium would once again be the paradise it had been before the original conflict. "The settlement is coming along well," Talon observed, gazing toward the distant valley where both Solastra survivors and Vexery had begun building a shared community. "Jovan has a gift for diplomacy," Nira smiled, thinking of her brother. Wound had healed without a scar, but the experience had transformed him in other ways. Now he worked tirelessly to bridge the ancient divide between their peoples, translating for both sides, finding common ground where only enmity had existed before in Davros. She asked, though she already knew the answer. "Still under guard." Tolan replied, "The combined council will decide his fate tomorrow. Exile seems most likely. Neither side wants to begin the new era with an execution." Nira nodded, relieved. "God, more death would only taint the fragile peace they were building," she asked, finally voicing the question that had lingered between them for days. "Will you return to Earth with the prism's technology?" Talon was silent for a long moment, watching the distant horizon where the twin suns were beginning their descent. "Earth needs the knowledge," he finally said, "but not the prism itself. That belongs here, with its guardians." "And its guardians?" Nira asked softly. "Do they belong only to Asterium?" He turned to her then, his silver eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. "That's what I've been trying to decide." His voice grew quieter, more intimate. "For so long, I've been a wanderer, running from one world to the next, never staying long enough to put down roots. But here, here," she prompted when he fell silent. "Here, I found something I wasn't looking for." His hand found hers. There, fingers intertwining with now familiar warmth, purpose greater than collecting artifacts. People worth fighting for, worth staying for. Nira's heart quickened. The connection that had formed between them when they'd touched the prism together had only deepened with time. They had seen each other's souls in that moment. There was no hiding, no pretense possible between them now. "And is there someone in particular?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "worth staying for?" Instead of answering with words, Talon drew her closer. His free hand gently traced the curve of her face, the ceremonial markings that spiraled across her indigo skin. When his lips met hers, it felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. As the kiss deepened, the physical expression of a bond that had formed across stars and species. forged in fire and sealed by shared purpose. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "I'll need to return to Earth eventually," Tolan said, his forehead resting against hers. "To share what we've learned, to help them find their own path to restoration." "And then," Nira asked. "And then I come back," he promised, "to you. This world we're helping to rebuild." His smile turned playful. "Besides, someone needs to teach your people about those mechanical wings. Imagine what your scouts could do with that technology." Nira laughed, the sound carrying across the newly verdant landscape. "Perhaps I'll come with you. See this Earth that produced such a strange, wonderful human?" Below them in the valley that had once been a battlefield, lights began to appear as the new settlement prepared for nightfall. Aster and Vexery children played together in the twilight, too young to remember the hatred that had divided their parents and grandparents. "It won't be easy," Nira said, sobering as she watched them. "Centuries of distrust and violence can't be erased in a few weeks." "No," Tolan agreed. "But every new beginning starts with a choice to break the cycle, to forge a different path." His hand tightened around hers. "Your people made the wrong choice once. Now you have the chance to make a better one." As darkness fell completely, they made their way down the newly formed path toward the settlement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, diplomatic negotiations, decisions about resource sharing, the continuing work of restoration. Tonight, under Asterium's twin moons and blanket of stars, they walked hand in hand toward a future neither could have imagined a month ago. The prism's energy continued to pulse outward, healing not just the land, but the people who called it home. Old wounds would take time to heal completely. Old hatreds would not disappear overnight. But something new was growing here. Something as fragile and promising as the saplings pushing through the once barren soil. In the heart of the settlement, where the communal fire burned brightly, Joven greeted them with a tired smile. Representatives from both peoples sat together, sharing a meal, tentatively building connections that their ancestors would have thought impossible. "The council is ready to vote on the water distribution system," Joven informed them. "There, waiting for you both." Nira exchanged a glance with Talon, drawing strength from his presence. Together, they had awakened the prism. Together, they had begun the healing of a world. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they joined the circle around the fire, hands still linked, Nira felt a profound sense of rightness. The future stretching before them was uncertain, full of difficulties and wonders in equal measure. But for the first time since losing her family, she was not facing it alone. The stars above had been rewritten, their patterns shifting, to accommodate new possibilities. And on the world below, among the new growth and ancient stones, two people from vastly different worlds,